Good afternoon. Welcome to the January Eastern Region webinar, Developing Sustainable Programs, Building Sustainability into a Project Design. If you would please welcome our moderator for the day, Dan Van Otten. Dan is a senior consultant with Native American Management Services and has been providing consulting services to ANA eligible clients for many years. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you. Thanks for attending. Really appreciate you taking the time to do this. We're going to talk about developing sustainable programs today, and let's start by just sort of thinking about a little bit of the history of what we thought developing sustainable programs amounted to. In the past, we talked about sustainability in the context of, well, we're going to have to write more proposals. We're going to have to write a lot more applications to get this thing funded over and over and over again. It's important to the community, and we know that it's important to the community. And so we're going to have to keep a funding stream going, and that means that we're going to be continually in a writing mode and trying to figure out how to add new twists to this program so that we can get some more funding from those folks that don't want to fund ongoing operations. Writing additional applications for funding is certainly one strategy for doing sustainability. And we're going to talk about that toward the end of this webinar. But we're going to talk about it in the context of using that strategy in a more effective, more efficient way. It's not going to be a primary strategy. It's certainly not going to be the only strategy that we talk about or employ when we're thinking about developing sustainable programs. Sustainability really truly involves transforming projects and project elements into programs and program elements. You know, we think of things in project periods, like ANA gives us a project period that we're working with. Our job, if we're going to build that sustainability into that operation, is to transform that project into an ongoing program. And we kind of swim uphill in doing that. We're swimming upstream, rather, in doing that. And ANA hasn't helped us in the past in getting a handle on sustainability. ANA used to, if you remember back in the good old days, used to have a thing about if the project is completed by the end of the project period, then we don't have to think about sustainability or address the sustainability issue. That was part of our impact evaluation. The queries that we got when we were doing impact evaluations, people would ask us, well, was it finished? And if so, it doesn't need to be sustained. That was the wrong message. That was the wrong message. Sustainability really has to be a part of any project that has any value in the community. For instance, one of the areas that we used to have the project is completed, it doesn't have to be sustained. Click the box on that one. Category was with code development. If the project was working on hunting and fishing codes, for instance, and by the end of the project period we'd have a hunting and fishing code created and adopted. The project, according to ANA at that point, was completed, no sustainability needed. Well, that's not correct. Sustainability in the context of a code development is the ongoing application of that code. To what extent does that code continue to be used to provide benefits and results in the community? So sustainability is an integral part, and we need to start thinking of it as an integral part of any worthwhile project. Definition, a dictionary definition of sustainability, keeping something in existence, maintaining something. Look at the next two pieces of this definition, and you'll see that one of those pieces, one of those subsets, deals with systems in the community, sustainable society. The second, the bottom definition, deals with organizational sustainability. And when we think of sustainability and think about developing a sustainability strategy for our projects that will transform them into programs, think about sustainability in those two contexts. How will this project be sustained, continue to provide ongoing results and benefits in the community, first piece, and then the bottom piece, the second piece, the organizational piece. How will we continue to build capacity, results, and benefits in our organization to keep the project going? Or how will we continue to build organizational capacity in terms of partnerships and leveraged resources to keep the project going, transform it into a program? We're going to talk about sustainability in both of those contexts, community sustainability, organizational sustainability. Okay, so here we are with the sustainability issues that deal with program. Sustainability is maintaining and continuing the project results. And as we were saying earlier, sustainability involves turning a project or key elements of a project into an ongoing program, transforming a project into a program. The focus of this webinar, most of this webinar is going to talk about strategies for doing that, strategies for creating that transformation or building that the ability to do that transformation into the design of a project. Sustainability does not mean that we're going to continue the project indefinitely in its initial form. It does not mean that. It means that we're going to continue the results and the benefits of that project in the community and continue to have the capacity in our organization to affect those changes in the community on an ongoing basis. Sustainability means building a set of operational results and benefits that basically create a new way of doing business. A new way of doing business in our communities, a new way of doing business in our organizations. Let's think about asset building for a minute. Asset building is something we haven't done as much of in our communities as we could. We're starting to really focus on that area. Building the educational framework for folks to operate in and personally operate in is a way of building assets. We've done that for a long time on a limited basis through higher ed scholarships. Most of us have a higher ed scholarship program in our community or tribal organizations offering of program activities. And in the past, we've done that scholarship program using 638 funds or using foundation funds or using funds that had a sort of grant focus to them, transfer payment focus to them. People are now starting to say, well, let's do that differently. Let's build a higher ed program that also involves potential recipients putting some resources aside to use in their education, their post-secondary education experience, and we'll match those. We'll match those funds. We'll match those funds, and maybe we'll supplement them with some grant funds. But we're going to do business differently. We're going to encourage people to invest in their future. We're going to stretch our funds further. We're going to build an ongoing program mechanism that allows us to provide more higher ed assistance to a wider number of folks for a longer period of time by doing some innovative practices, changing the way we do business. And that's really kind of what sustainability is all about. How do we move into a new way of doing business that allows us to continue to operate beneficial programs and to continue to do that through an effective organizational structure? Sustainability focuses on achieving and maintaining long-range goals. It's impossible, I think, to emphasize the importance of long-range goals, to overemphasize the importance of long-range goals when we're talking about sustainability. long-range goals are the framework within which sustainability has to take place. If we're not working within the context of a long-range community goal or a long-range organizational goal, then we're working sort of in a non-formed area that people don't really care about. We want to make sure that the programs that we operate are helping the community, helping our organization move toward the achievement of long-range goals. If we are in that mode, if we are working in a long-range goal framework for our community and for our organization, sustainability strategies become a heck of a lot easier to develop and implement. So what we end up doing through that long-range goal context is moving from treating symptoms to moving toward achieving long-term positive change, long-term positive change. So when we think about sustainability and when we think about how we're going to build that into our project design, think about how we're going to develop the project, because how we develop the project, who we include, what we include in developing the project helps us build that sustainability component of the project. If we include the community, if we're working with the community in accomplishment of a long-range community goal that's important to the community, and we include the community in project development, and they see that this project is going to help the community move toward that essential long-range goal, the community is going to be really supportive of project sustainability. And that kind of support is important in a lot of ways. It's important politically in dealing with elected officials. It's important in developing resources for the project in terms of community action. And it's important in attracting partners to the project, because partners are really more easily attracted to operation of a program, participation in a program, collaboration in a program, if they see that the community is really behind the program, is really engaged in the program's operation, and is benefiting from the program. So the process we use in project development is really as important and informs the project design that we end up with in moving our project into an application. Project design is basically what we describe in an application for funding. So involve the community in project development. Involve the community in project development in a variety of ways. For those of you that have not engaged in developing comprehensive plans with long-range community goals, think about doing that. Think about having that as an A&A project at some point in time. A&A is really committed to helping communities develop long-range goals, because long-range goals, as we were just saying, is a critical part of helping the community establish priorities for program development, establishing priorities for program operation, and establishing the way we use resources in those interactions. So engage the community in project development, engage the community in long-range goal development, and make sure that project development is a component of, and falls within the framework of long-range community goals. That really will help ensure that the community is going to benefit from the project, and that the benefits and results of the project will be ongoing. If the community is behind the project, sees the value of the project, participates in the project, supports the project, that means the project is going to be, has a great chance at any rate of being sustained. That sustainability, as we said, comes not just, sustainability is certainly a part of what the community provides and the framework the community brings to a project's operation, but it's also what attracts partners and leveraged resources to a project. Engage partners in the planning process, of program and project development, and let partners, potential partners, see how that project is unfolding and the benefits that it's bringing to the community and the possibility for their participation in that project and getting some ancillary benefits for themselves out of that participation. An example, and if we're doing a financial literacy program and we've engaged the community in taking a look at why we've got such a high rate of bad debt, debt default, bad credit, inability to move forward with towards financial stability in the community. Community members are saying, yep, that's something we need to address. Long-term financial stability for community members is a long-range goal of this community. What's standing in the way of that is our inability at this point to do effective financial planning. At least that's one of the things. Probably there are a variety of things, but that's one of them. So we move forward with project design, and we talk to some folks at Consumer Credit Counseling and say, you know, we're moving forward with this project, and we're interested in bringing you in as a partner. Our community would get a lot from your participation because of the expertise that you could bring to the table. What we can provide to you, is some space and a ready-made pool of participants for your project's operation, for doing the things that you're already being paid to do. That kind of reciprocity in building partnerships is part of what we build into a sustainability strategy. We do it in the planning process. We do it in the implementation process of a project. Okay, already beat the drum on long-range goals. They're the foundation of sustainability strategies. And both community and organizational long-range goals are really critical components of developing that strategy. We want to think in both of those arenas when we're thinking about sustainability. If we don't build our organizational capacity to implement sustainability strategies, we're cutting ourselves off at the knees. So we have to work on both fronts. We have to work on both fronts in our planning process and in our project design process. What we're going to really focus on in feeling our way toward a sustainability strategy and a project design is we've got the long-range goals in place, and the next thing we're going to do, the next element that we're going to need to take a look at is what stands between the community and those long-range goals, what stands between our organizational long-range goals and our capability to move forward to implement the kind of programs we want to implement. That's the problem. The current condition that stands between the community and its long-range goals, the current conditions that stand between our organizational capacity and our long-range goals as an organization are problems that we need to address, we must address if we're going to move forward toward long-range goal accomplishment. A lot of times we talk about problems as a need for something or a lack of something. For instance, we talk about a need for affordable housing in our community, a need for affordable housing. Well, affordable housing really is the project. It's the project goal. It's not the problem statement. The problem statement might be overcrowding. It might be that community members are paying more for housing than they can afford. It might be that we have a high amount of deteriorated substandard housing, and that's all that folks can afford. Those might be the problems. Those might be the problems on the community side of the equation. On the organizational side of the equation, the problem would not, a lot of times we would describe the problem as we need to develop expertise in doing site design and housing development design. Well, that's what we want to get to. That's the point to which we want to get at as a result of our project's operation. We want to build that capacity. Our problem organizationally may be that we currently focus on social services and have built little or no expertise in the area of doing housing development. Getting a good handle on the problem statement, on the current conditions in the community, the current conditions in our organization is going to help us develop the project design and ensure that that project design is going to move us toward accomplishment of long-range community goals and long-range organizational goals. The project goal, then, the project goal describes changed conditions that will occur because of the project and that will help move the community and our organization closer to accomplishing long-range goals. For instance, a long-range goal might be all community members will live in decent, affordable housing of their choice. Okay? That may be the long-range community goal. All community members will live in decent, affordable housing of their choice. The project goal might be create a lease-to-own housing program for single-parent families in our community. Create a lease-to-own housing acquisition program for single-parent families in our community. The project goal takes a bite out of the problem. The problem is that people are living in unaffordable housing. People are living in homes that are substandard, that we have a high percentage of renters living in scattered site housing that doesn't meet their needs. Those are the problems that this project will take a bite out of, help move us toward our long-range goal of all community members living in decent, affordable housing of their choice. But it's only going to take a limited bite out. The project goal moves us down the road toward achieving the long-range goal and reducing or eliminating the problem that stands between us and that long-range goal, but only in an incremental way. Okay. So differentiate. We're differentiating here between the long-range goal and the project goal, but showing how a project goal definitely fits within a long-range goal framework, and that makes the project much easier to sustain. It shows how we're moving our community down the road toward long-range goal accomplishment, down a road that's supported by the community and community leaders, and down a road that we can bring some partners in and get their support as well. So a little bit about outputs and sustainability, and we're going to use these tools. We're going to use tools like outputs, outcomes, impact. Those are going to be pieces of a puzzle that we use in developing sustainability strategies. Outputs are the direct product of a project's activity. They don't describe a positive change in the community, but they do describe what exactly the project is accomplishing in terms of volume of work. Okay, so outputs might be things like number of low-income households served, or number of houses built, or the linear miles of street that are constructed, or the square footage of a community facility that's going to be constructed. Those are outputs. Those are the direct products of a project. They don't describe change in the community, but they're an important ingredient in helping to put together a foundation for that change to occur. And change in the community, change in the organization, change in the community are the things that help us move toward long-range goals, and the things, the elements of a project/program that makes it possible, makes it attractive to others to invest in or to continue the operation of programs, i.e. program sustainability. Okay, so outputs are the direct products of a project's activity. Important, measurable, direct products. Outcomes are the positive changes in condition that will be accomplished through the proposed project. Okay, so outcomes can include things like a decrease in the number of households that are living at or below the poverty level, an increase in the number of folks that are employed, an increase in the household wages in the community, an increase in the number of kids who are graduating from middle school or from high school, or an increase in the number of kids who are accessing post-secondary education. Those are changes in the community, positive changes in the community. That's the definition of an outcome. So the direct product of a project, the output, the changes in the community and in our organization created by the project, the outcome, are both important building blocks for creating a sustainability strategy. Our ability to show what those outcomes and outputs are, how we've successfully achieved them, what they've done in the community to move the community toward achieving long-range goals and reducing problems in the community, are just critical pieces of sustainability strategy development. Okay, and the final piece of this sort of trinity of project dynamics is impacts. And the impact of a project is basically the difference between what's happened in the community or what's happened in our organization as a result of the community's of the program's operation, and what would have happened or not happened if the program hadn't been in existence. What is the difference? What is the long-range difference? Impacts are sort of like long-range outcomes in the community, long-range outcomes in the community. So if, for instance, an outcome of the project's operation was that we have 20 new community members who are in permanent living wage jobs, that was what happened as an outcome. The long-range impact might be that we're shooting for is that the unemployment rate in our community drops from 35 to 20%, or from 20% to 10%. We're looking at short-term outcomes and longer-range impacts And we're going to document those shorter term outcomes and longer range impacts when we do our project's evaluation. We're going to project those outputs, outcomes, and impacts in our project design, and we're going to verify those outputs, outcomes, and impacts in our project's evaluation. Having that information at our disposal helps us with sustainability. It helps immeasurably with sustainability. It helps us to attract new investors. It helps us to keep partners that we already have and to build new partnerships. It helps us to diversify our funding. It helps us to secure supplemental resources, and it helps us to leverage funds. It helps us to do all of those things. And one of the ways, remember too, that we're talking about internal and external partnerships. One of the things that we may find is that by operating a program that has measurable, demonstrable outputs, outcomes, and impacts, we're going to get elements of that program incorporated into our general operational procedures. Elements of that program may be incorporated into the way the tribe or the community organization does business in social services operations, in job training and employment operations, in its legal operations. So we're going to see much more of the work that we do being institutionalized, which is a form of sustainability. If we just pay some attention to how we craft our outputs, outcomes, and our impact statements, our impact projections, make sure that we've measured and verified them, and present that information to decision makers, keep the community involved in the process, show how we're moving toward long-range goal accomplishment. That's going to help us institutionalize the work that we do. And that's a lot of what our work is all about, figuring out ways to make it permanent, sustained, right? Okay. So we've talked about partnerships. Let's just play with that a little bit more. Partnerships are the agreement between two or more entities, and that agreement focuses on support in developing a project, implementing a project, sustaining the project. It is a reciprocal relationship. Back in that example I was giving of consumer credit counseling, they're getting something out of the relationship, we're getting something out of the relationship. That's just a critical piece of partnership development and partnership maintenance. Build partnerships as part of the project design and include potential partners in the planning process. Get ownership early on. Get partnership ownership early on. Internal partners and external partners. We want that commitment on an ongoing basis, and the earlier we pick up partners in the process, the planning process, the better chance we have of keeping those partners as a project support, moving it into program operations, and sustainable program continuation. Leveraged resources. ANA used to have partnerships and leveraged resources as two of its impact indicators, and they're good indicators. They really are good indicators. They are elements that are critical pieces of good project design, and we have found that those projects that have strong partnerships built into their design and have included partners in project development processes are more likely to secure leveraged resources from those partners and from other sources. And and have leveraged resources as a way of continuing, expanding the project's operation while it's being funded as a pilot or a startup project, and continuing the operation of that project when it sort of transforms over into becoming an ongoing program. So remember that leveraged resources are not part of your initial budget. They are not part of the budget. They are resources that are attracted to your program because of the program's effectiveness and attractiveness. They can be federal or non-federal. And a lot of times they come from partners. But they continue past, quite often continue past the project period, and are often used to continue benefits and results of the project and project impacts after the end of the project period. Leveraged resources are just a critical piece of sustainability strategies. So, and they flow from, quite often flow from, internal and external partnerships. They flow from internal and external partnerships. They're contributions that those partners have made to the project, but not within the context of the project budget. For example, an A&A project. You know, we know A&A doesn't do construction, but A&A does do planning and project and design, architectural design stuff. So if we are using A&A money to do site planning and project architectural design, and we attract ICDVG money or rural development money for the bricks and mortar piece of that, whatever it is, housing, community facility, whatever we're working on in terms of project design, architectural design and site planning, we include that as a leveraged resource. That becomes a leveraged resource. That becomes something that actualizes the project, makes the project an ongoing reality. We use the A&E money for the startup, for the seed purposes, for the design purposes, and sustainability is entirely leveraged resources. Entirely leveraged resources in that kind of a project operation. So think about leveraged resources in that context. Resources attracted to the project because of the good work done by the project and the effective use of the budgeted funds in that project. Diversifying revenue streams. Look at your project in a variety of ways as you're designing it, and think about what opportunities might present themselves for engaging in some fee-for-service operation through training, through technical service assistance, through sales of some sort of product that's manufactured as a part of the project, and by project manufactured product, I'm talking about things like training manuals or videos, or in a language program, the structure of a sustainability program and an immersion program, and how that immersion program might be marketed, the framework of that immersion program marketed to other organizations. So include that kind of design element in your project design, but not necessarily in your proposal. Not necessarily in your proposal. Think about what opportunities do we have in this project for generating revenues. Don't need to include that information necessarily included in the proposal for funding, but keep it in the project design that you've got at home. You may decide that it's worth putting in the proposal if you think that it has a strong part of a sustainability, a viable sustainability strategy that you have already done a little bit of testing on. For instance, if you're doing a community garden and you are thinking about moving past a community garden into a farmer's market kind of operation, the proposal that you're looking at is a community garden proposal, but you're thinking that a couple of years down the road we might be able to move this into a farmer's market operation, generate revenue through the farmer's market to continue the community garden piece, and you think that that's got some reasonable financial feasibility, market analysis components already under your belt that you can use to make those projections, go ahead and include that in the proposal. If you haven't done that work, go ahead and keep that piece to yourself. Don't include it in the proposal, but start working on it as a sustainability strategy, a revenue diversification strategy that you can use to move the project on into its freestanding program status past the project period without including it in the proposal itself. Keep that budget sort of figures on a cup account basis. Start building on that cup account and see what you can come up with in addition to the work that you're doing under the proposal itself as funded. Continuation grants from private foundations. We're getting into an area now where those pieces that we talked about earlier, the outputs, the outcomes, the impacts, the long-range community goals, the involvement of the community in those long-range goal statements, development, the involvement of the community in defining the current conditions in the community that are keeping the community from reaching those long-range goals, the project design and community involvement in that project design, and the organization building its own sort of parallel set of outputs, outcomes, and impacts in the area of capacity building. All of those pieces are pieces that are going to fit into applications for continuation funding from private foundations. And there are a number of look around your area. Look for community foundations. Most of us have community foundations hanging around in the state in which we're located, some adjacent communities, municipalities, counties. Look for community foundation funding. Look for foundations like Northwest Area Foundation that does ongoing funding of projects, long-term commitments. A number of foundations are now engaged in long-term commitments to grantees, not just 1 year, 2 year, 3 year things. Long-term commitments. Go to the foundation directory. Look for that kind of foundation focus. You can get that information online from the foundation directory or from the local library. Most local libraries have a copy of the foundation directory in them. And a lot of times you're going to find that foundations tend to provide that funding, that kind of ongoing funding, on the basis of, not on the basis of solicited proposals, that you're going to have to do some connection work, building a relationship with that foundation. Good example of how that has happened in the Indian world is the Pecan Institute. The Pecan Institute works on Blackfeet language preservation. Don't have any grant writers to speak of. The Institute is basically funded through foundation funding and some other streams, but on the basis of non-competitive funding awards. And that's because Daryl Kipp has built, a good, strong relationship, interface with a couple of foundations. Think about how you, your leaders, members of your community can start moving toward approaching some foundations that have funding priorities that fit within the outputs, outcomes, and impacts of projects that you're successfully putting together and have operated on a startup basis, and how you are going to approach those foundation funders for ongoing resources, either on a competitive or non-competitive basis, solicited or unsolicited proposal. It works. It really, truly works. Other federal funds. We've got a variety of federal funders that, even though they don't talk about it much, they provide ongoing funding. Things like the 184 loan guarantee. If we're working in housing and we're wanting to move folks into affordable housing ownership basis, getting involved in something like, we build our capacity through NAHASDA, and we build a home acquisition component into our NAHASDA program. We want to spin that out and get ongoing funding for that kind of operation, get it out of the, so we can get it out of the tribal funding stream, so we can use our tribal funds for other purposes. Go to the 184 Loan Guarantee Program, operated by ONAP, Office of Native American Programs, provides ongoing funding, guarantees for home ownership, and for things like for home development, for new construction. You can get new construction funding guarantees for tribal operations out of the 184 program. Reduce our commitment, our tribe's commitment to that particular program area, develop an ongoing funding stream or revenue resource, or a set of planned revenue pieces that we can use to move our direct funding out of the picture, use it for something else, and use somebody else's, diversify our resources, use somebody else's resources for some of the things we've been doing directly. The 477 program, another good example, how we can bring together a bunch of tribal operations. For instance, we may have been looking at doing small business development. We can use money from TANF, from DOL and BIA in conjunction to do a small business development operation using that combined resource under a 477 program plan. Environmental Protection Agency provides us with ongoing resources. We can start up doing some water quality control, land conservation work using A&A funds, spin that off into ongoing funding from EPA. Same thing with EDA. We can get ongoing funding for operations that move from a project to a program status through the Economic Development Administration, both in terms of their local partnership grants and in terms of large competitive discretionary grants that will provide us with startup funds for operations that we designed, economic development operations we designed, using A&A, doing the planning parts. So think about other federal funds as potential sources of sustainability funds. And again, we're building on the outputs, outcomes, and impacts that we created and documented, showed that we accomplished through effective evaluation of those projects, that we built on project designs that we got startup funds from. So we're getting the ongoing funding as a result of effective project design in startup funding projects. State funds, domestic violence programs, rental assistance programs, weatherization programs, homeless assistance programs, nutrition programs, all of that stuff can come out of state coffers. It's available to us, and it's available to us through nonprofit and to us through tribal government. We can work and do work under state contracts on ongoing basis in a good number of programmatic areas, and those programmatic areas often have been started up again on a pilot basis using A&A or other startup funds to do some project design, pilot project work. Good partnership, colleges and universities. We can get a lot of help out of graduate schools. We can get a lot of help out of internships. We can get a lot of help out of our tribal colleges. Don't neglect this particular resource in terms of ongoing relationships and ongoing partnerships. They're particularly valuable resource in doing project evaluation work, and can add some real heavyweight credibility to us and our sustainability efforts. Okay, coming to the end, folks. So indicators of sustainability initiatives. Program can be modified, has to be modified over time to address emerging problems. That's a very clear and critical indicator of program sustainability. Has to have a champion. That champion doesn't need to be an individual. A lot of times the champion is the community. It's the community. And it's the community that keeps us going, keeps us moving. The program fits within the organization's mission and its processes and procedures, and that has to do in part with our organizational capacity building that becomes part of our sustainability strategy. Program benefits the community, it benefits community members, and those benefits are clear and readily perceived. You know, they're clearly perceived, they're readily perceived. The community sees them, potential funders see them, partners see them. They buy into the project through support of the project. Stakeholders in the community and your organizations, as well as other organizations, provide support. That kind of ongoing broad-based support is an important indicator of sustainability. One of the things that you may want to do at some point in time is think about developing strategic plans for program sustainability, and use this sort of an outline for building the framework for that sustainability plan. How is the community involved in the long-range goal development, the problem statement development, the program, the project goal and the program design element of the plan? What's the capacity of the program operation within our organization currently, and how are we going to move that capacity into a stronger, wider context so that we can effectively continue the program or program elements into the future, the benefits, results, and impacts, the outputs, outcomes, and impacts of the program into the future. How are we going to diversify our funding mix as part of our sustainability strategy, and what kind of partnerships can we use to do that diversification? Questions? So Rondell, do you want to open it up for questions?
You can either raise your hand or type your question under the question menu on your control panel. Okay, we have two questions, Dan.
Okay.
Or one question. Dan, are you available for consultation for communities and orgs who are applying for A&A funds? Dan, I'm going to take this one if you don't mind. Patty, Dan is one of our consultants, and you can put in a request for him to help you with an A&A project. He can't do any of the writing for you, but he can certainly look your project over and give you some real good feedback. Any other questions?
Well, thank you for your patience. This is an awful lot to try and zip through in a fairly short period of time. I think one of the things that we're going to find is that sustainability is becoming much more of an emphasis at the funder level, and we're going to need to start spending a lot more time and take some longer sessions, put together some longer ongoing back and forth dialogues on how we can build sustainability into all the work we do. And I really look forward to doing that with you, so thanks.
Okie doke. Thank you, Dan. Really appreciate it. Just want to let you know on that note, we are going to be doing a series of sustainability webinars that'll begin in April and run April, May, June, and July. Trying to spread out and go over different aspects of sustainability that Dan talked about today. So please stay tuned. We'll be sending notice out on the listserv. We're hoping to make those a little bit more interactive so that you can talk with Dan back and forth as we're going through the different webinars, or with the instructor that we have for a particular topic. I will be sending out the PowerPoint to folks after we are finished. We appreciate everybody, everybody's attention. And Patty, I will email you separately about sending the request. It's basically just an email to me doing that request. Oh, another question has come in. If you have invested funds and energy to create a language program, and one factor that your program has discovered is that the higher education systems are not receptive to native language programs, what public education regulation or policies can tribes address to develop more unified effort to sustain languages?
So what kind, I'm kind of hearing the question being, what kinds of coalitions and what kinds of joint efforts can we engage in our parts of the country to jog the higher ed folks into a more reasonable, realistic, and a better understanding of the importance of our languages and the preservation of our languages as an important piece of a linguistic program, a language program in higher ed. You know, there are some pretty good models for how that can work, and I don't know where you are, where this person is. But
they're in the western region.
The western region?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in Oregon, where I am, the Northwest Indian Language Institute, Neely, at the University of Oregon has got a great model for working a very strong partnership between higher ed and tribal language operations, tribal language programs. There are a couple of programs down in the Southwest that are also engaged in that operation. And if Rondell, if you can send me an email address, I'll send some contact information to that individual.
Okay. Do you have any examples of integration with public education?
Sure. There have been a couple of programs, like at Warm Springs here. I'll talk about Oregon again. Warm Springs, where where tribal language has become a part of the classroom presentations during the school regular school operation. I think the same thing has happened or was going to happen down at Klamath. Mukluk folk were working with the school district to have language be incorporated into school curriculum. Over at Grand Round, the Chinook Wawa program, it's not part of the school curriculum, but it's being offered before and after, after school in the school facility for kids that are interested in language engagement, language preservation. And there's a great deal of encouragement for the participation in Chinook Wawa from the community and from the school itself. So there are a couple of models: incorporation of language curriculum into the school day, and that's being done for Native and non-Native kids. It's just not kids from the tribe that are taking those courses. It's non-Native kids as well, and then the use of the school facility to provide community-based language programs after school hours.
Okay, great. Well, if we don't have any other questions, we have gone just a little bit over our hour. We thank you very much for joining us. We hope that you will join us next month for our webinar in February, where we're going to talk about cohesive applications. One of the problems that reviewers see when looking at A&A applications that ultimately don't get funded. So please look out for the notice. There was just one sent today, as a matter of fact. It'll be held on February 21st at the same time, 3 p.m. in the afternoon. So please plan on joining us for that, and then look to April for the beginning of our sustainability series.